Welcome to another exploration into the old world. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the city of Providence in the state of Rhode Island in the United States of America. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and I certainly encourage you to check the backlog of videos posted on the channel, over 150 now for your viewing pleasure. You may find a location that is close to your heart. And of course, don't forget to like and comment. Thanks for being here. So we begin with a bit of geography, as we always do. And we see Providence right here in the small state of Rhode Island. We have featured mansions in Newport, Rhode Island. We've looked at Boston, Hartford, and Providence, of course. This is a very large file showing a lot of evidence of the old world. And we see a population demographics curve here. A lot of the buildings we look at come from this time period here, so just over 100,000. We're about 150 actually by the 1900, which is quite large for cities at this time. Of course, Providence being on the eastern seaboard, one of the older cities according to the historical narrative. The purpose of this channel, of course, is to question the historical narrative. We're seeing here a bird's eye view from 1895. And right away we have a bit of a discrepancy with the Capitol building. Capitol building being included in this bird's eye view, even though it's 1895 and this one wasn't completed according to our historical narrative until 1901. So is that just a rendering of what's to come, or are they trying to depict the stage of completion? This certainly looks complete to my eye. So one of many historical anomalies we find here on this channel. I'm going to move fairly quickly through the file to keep it a reasonable size for video. But right away we are seeing the very early depictions of Providence, and the question we have here is the disconnect between what we're told about the historical narrative and what we're seeing in architecture and infrastructure for these very early time periods. We're told, according to the historical narrative, that we don't really get any power or power tools or milling or any of that kind of stuff until the 1890s, which really sped along the process of construction. But we see all these multi-storied buildings coming from a much earlier time period than what we're told. So it has raised many questions. We also see the tracks here for the streetcar. Again, something that has been shadowed out in our history, let's say. But when you do the research, you find that these streetcars were part of the infrastructure in many of the old city. We're also seeing a lot of this megalithic blockwork along the canals in Providence. So what am I trying to imply? I am suggesting the timeline of our historical narrative has been distorted and has been written into our history to favor those that have taken power and gained power. Many of these characters, such as the robber barons, the wealthy robber barons of the Industrial Revolution, the late Industrial Revolution. I mean, even the name robber baron implies some sort of theft going on, and I think what happened is they were stealing what already existed in the old world and claiming it to be a creation of oil. And of course, this suggestion has very far-reaching implications. We then have to question the chronology of the history of the continent and beyond. Much of my channel focuses on the North American continent just because of the short historical timeline of what we'll call civilization here. And this is a good example of what looks to be infrastructure, a cohesive infrastructure from a previous civilization. You can see the streetcar track running down the middle of this narrow road. And you see 4 or 5-story buildings surrounding each side of the street. This would be from between the 1860s and 1890s. This photo would have been taken. I don't know exactly. But that should tell you that what we're seeing with our eyes and what we're being told don't align. And then, being from a building background, I have problems with believing that these massive structures were put together, again, at such an early time period, and they were finished in such a manner to really catch the eye. So there has to be some sort of disconnect. Here we're looking at the arcade. This arcade here we have a little write-up. The arcade, built in 1828. So we're to believe that this structure here was put together almost 200 years ago in Providence, Rhode Island. You can see again what would be required to make these columns. Is this a mold? Or are they going to try to tell us that this was carved by rock? Because they would have to, because we weren't really working with concrete molds back then. So many questions having to do with the narrative. And then we see these types of structures. They're calling it armory. They say it was built in 1907. Magnificent structure, you can see, looking like a castle and having a very open area on the interior. They say that it was as wide as 2 football fields on the inside. So many of us in this research community who have dug into previous modes of transportation suggest these very large structures' original purpose may have been to house and repair and over-repair a lot of the blimps or dirigible airships that were a part of transportation at the time before the robber barons took over and took over with the internal combustion engine and the petroleum industry and changed our mode of transportation. I think it's certainly worth considering when you really look at the evidence from the past. The Athenaeum, or a very early private library, I think is what they call that, 1838, again, almost 200 years old. And the pattern will repeat itself here in Providence. The bank looking like it could be a government building. Still stands to this day. We have another bank here, the Old Stone Bank. Now this one's a real stunner. Let's take a modern day look at it. The old stone, the writing looking very secondary, not looking like it's a part of the creation itself. And as we look into the interior, we really start to understand that the timelines on these are absolutely absurd. We have a build date on this of 1854. So we're to believe that this was all crafted by hand in 1854 by master craftsmen and artisans. Master architects, really, that weren't, they're just local. Phantom architects, these people hardly exist in our historical narrative. They appear to be almost written in some form of artificial intelligence. As you look closer into the past, it begins to look more and more ridiculous. These are spectacular looking structures. Everything, no detail left to chance. Everything was just, looks like it was where it was meant to be for a reason. So a different philosophy and mentality from the past. We have built more hotels, supposedly built in 1922, and then this sort of historical narrative and the anomalies continue right up until World War II. Some very interesting going on with our historical timeline, hard to pin down. The Butler Exchange is a spectacular structure. You can see here 1871 to 1925. Again, the level of detail, the multi-storied aspect. You almost forget how large these are when you look at them. They look like wedding cakes. This is a 5-6-story structure. We've got double row of dormers on the mansard-style roof. We've got all sorts of what we call tech in this community. This community also suggests that what was going on was there was a relationship that these cities had with the ether, the energy in the atmosphere, and they were able to harness and use that as a part of running the society, I suppose you could say, for lack of a better term. Antiquitech, or tech, you'll see it repeat itself. I don't think these were just for decoration. The Butler Exchange. And there's the old one, and apparently it was moved into what we'll see later, the Industrial Trust Company. And they give us a construction photo. This construction photo is coming out of 1872. So I don't know. Another problem with the construction photos we're given is how poorly done and anomalous they are. You can see the shading here, different than the shading here. This looking like it could easily have been done with rulers, the way this is drawn together. I think a very poor attempt at a construction photo. And we do see that as we look into the old world. And of course you might ask, why would they fake a construction photo? Well, if there's an attempt to distort history and have people of the future or the present believe what they're being told about history, then it certainly makes sense that there'd be forgeries involved with making the past appear to be what it was not. And I think the question always comes up, well, why would the lie be so large? I think in order for these forces that are in control here to maintain that control, they need to maintain that lie, and they will do anything they can to perpetuate it. A little interesting postcard. There are some folks in Providence that don't want to see you folks yet. Very strange, and this theme seems to repeat itself too. It's like they don't want to visitors, while they're trying to get established into these locations, people coming. That's what it makes me think of anyway. Maybe not. Again, early time period, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 stories, somewhere in that range. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it would take quite an effort at that early time period to put these structures up. And we don't see a lot of evidence of that effort. They just seem to be there. You can see the symbolism here. A lot of this deception gets into these secret societies and what they may have been keeping from the general public who are not in the know, let's say, or initiated into that knowledge. Very possible. We're looking at the Market Square, 1844, about 20,000 people living there, but again you can see the size of the structures for that early time period. Again, why go to the trouble of building a 4-story house or building? All of these seem to be 3-4 stories tall. That is a lot of work for a small population. Interesting looking structure in the middle of the street here. Multiple fountains, and the suggestion is that the fountains served a cooling purpose and they were connected with the structures. Some way of grounding and cooling the energy. I'm not sure exactly. It's all up for investigation at this point. The Carey Tower at Brown University. Magnificent looking. Copper looking clock there. And as we look closer to, you can see the 4 on the old clocks indicated by 4 eyes rather than the IV that we're used to seeing. We'll get into some of the churches now. Couldn't find any other photos of this one. We have the Central Congregational, 1893, we're told it's built. We'll take a look at some of the interior. Absolutely amazing. We've got herringbone brick pattern going on here in 1893 in Providence. Absolutely spectacular. Suggested I don't think we'd be able to do this in the modern day, or if we did, it would be such a monumental undertaking that it would be the news. It would be international news to build such a structure. But back in 1893, they were doing it everywhere. Interesting one, 1809, going back more than 200 years. Interesting to say it's the oldest church because we'll see one that's a bit older. It still stands here in the modern day, and even in 1809 they felt the need to build a dome. And that, to me, looks like it's woven together with some sort of blockwork. Pretty amazing for 1809. This one coming from 1775. Again, part of that old narrative in New England, in the United States. Still stands. Interesting though, when we take a look at the bottom of it here, and then we see how it looks here in the modern day. So we have a resloping maybe. We'll continue with our churches, just to give you a sense of how many there were, how amazing they were. St. Peter's and Paul's Cathedral, 1873 they're saying this one was constructed. As we look at the interior again, you have to wonder what types of craftsmen were supposed to have been available in Providence. And again, a feat that in our modern day would be international news to have accomplished such a feat of construction. But again, in 1873 in Providence, this was no problem. Build it with stone and make it look spectacular in the interior. Again, we see the old time, the old world time. And here's a view looking right up into the ceiling structure. Amazing. Amazing. Old world. We have a city hall said to have gone up in 1878. Looking like similar things we've seen out of Boston. You see some of the interior. In 1878 they were putting together an interior at this level of construction. Again, how were they milling up these stone columns in 1873? Was it steam powered? Was it water powered? The lathe? I have to wonder. I'm looking right up into the ceiling area again here, just to get a sense of that symmetry. 1878. The picture is actually not fitting in with the surroundings, I would suggest. And then you can see here now a comparison from the modern day and the previous photo. It has been scaled back a little bit, you can tell. There's been some changes here and here. This part has been removed. So it has been dulled down for our modern day eyes. And we have an early courthouse. Didn't stand for all that long. Amazing looking old world structure, ticking all those boxes. Very difficult to complete this, I would suggest. And we have a later courthouse going up to replace the old one, we're told. Also looking very much like an old world structure, although the construction date puts it into the 20s. Looking and feeling like it easily could have been built at the same time frame as those ones they say were built in the early 1800s. But we have what's given to us, again, a story, a narrative, a chronology that fits, or supposedly fits, the timeline we are being led to believe is truth. And the question remains, who were those craftsmen? They tell us about the architects, the critically acclaimed architects, but we never know who the craftsmen are. They sort of just fade out of time. And really does a disservice to those that built these, or even were said to have built these. The old hospital, and there you see the front of the old hospital again. We also have what they tell us is a construction photo. The hospital, they have a very large bell here, that's interesting. We have the classic top-headed figurines, or figures, maybe figurines, and a difficult to believe construction photo. They're looking very piecemeal, the way it's going together. The Industrial Trust, the first Industrial Trust, I think, maybe. Here's the second Industrial Trust building. And I have a couple interiors, but I'm not sure if this interior... This must come from the second one that we just looked at, but I can't be sure. And we can see that it was used as a landing dock for this blimp air travel. And again, that ties in with what we consider to be old world transportation. Cheap or free or easy air travel that has been taken away from us, and now you need several $1,000s to board a flight to wherever you want to go. And it's loud and obnoxious, and the windows are tiny and curved, and certainly not the same type of travel experience. Again, we're looking at a construction photo, looking like a lot of construction photos that we get. And you always have to ask the question, why are the skies so whited out? Difficult for me to believe a lot of these old construction photos as being legitimate. And there you have it again. And a look again at the interior. Again, I'm not sure which industrial trust company this is, but spectacular, ornately finished stone columns, old world. And we're seeing several structures fitting this time frame here for construction and demolition. The old infantry hall. This thing was taken out by a fire, we are being told. A depiction of them fighting that fire. Several libraries, very early, again, fitting the Providence narrative, some of them. There we have the John Hay Library in the modern day. Again, you can see the streets, how uneven it is. This one looking like it's got 2 more steps lower than this one on this side. A very strange and, dare I say, a dangerous way to build steps, not coming down to a level platform. And then, of course, we have the new public library. They say it's new. That's, again, to throw us off the scent. Nothing new looking about this one at all. You can see how detailed the front is here. We have a copper-style roof. You can imagine trying to duplicate that in the modern day. Trying to, even just to source the materials. Are we to say that those materials were that readily available at this early time period? Some of the interior, of course. Can you imagine finishing the coffered ceiling here? Imagine the scaffold setup you would need. Very difficult sometimes to picture the build process. Here we have the classic rosette style. Sometimes they're octagonal, sometimes they're square. You can see these in a lot of the old worlds. You can see the columns here looking like marble columns. Very over-the-top, ornate. Amazing. Nothing here is plain. There's no hallway to the side that is just a plain rectangle. You know, even this little side hallway is just amazing. Beautiful. This is the library in Providence. Public library. They don't build them like this anymore, do they? We get a depiction from 1865, Market Square. This is right around the Civil War, we're being told. Again, you can see the multi-storied structures that existed at this early time period. A lot of work. These, even at this old time period, 1865, you can see how old this is looking here. None of this looking like it's recently constructed. We call this the Market Square. And on the right, we're looking at the state capitol. We're not there yet, though. On the left, we're looking at the construction of the Masonic Temple. This is a construction photo. That's right. So again, does this look real to you? Does this look like a real build to you? To me, this looks like a joke, complete fabrication. So again, if we're seeing this type of thing, why are we seeing this type of thing? We have to ask. This is the construction. This is the building that they're trying to depict as being put together here. To me, that's an absolute absurdity. Well, we have actually a former Masonic Hall as well. Coming from a very early time period as well. Beautiful looking structure though, and they seem to be everywhere. Let's not forget the museum. The quality of construction. Spectacular. The old Narragansett Hotel. There it is again. We do have a postcard of the lobby. That's all I could really find of the interior. Really, really amazing the way these are finished. Again, even in the modern day with all our machinery, these would take years to finish in such a manner, to source the materials, to install everything properly. It's an unbelievable venture. So we question the timeline. We have to question the timeline as well, I think. There's too much evidence. We've seen too much. And there's a different psychology behind the construction of these as well, something that we don't share in the modern day. Even trying to think up how to design such a structure, I think we have trouble wrapping our heads around. Here's a normal school. This was a part of the normalization of curriculum, of what was being taught in the schools, or what was needing to be taught. So we have a new narrative. We have that robber baron influence taking over education, taking over medicine, taking over all the professional fields. The Opera House. This was difficult to find, 1871 to 1931. They say this was built in 90 days. It's absolutely ridiculous. Here's a shot, apparently, of the last show, the final show before they tore this sucker down. 1931. And a few more shots of it. It's supposedly the interior of the Opera House, looking down at the stage. A ghost. Nothing more than a ghost in the history books now. Very difficult to find the Opera House. Here we have a post office going up in 1903. And I mean, these people were just frivolous with the way they put things together. Everything was detailed. Nothing. I tend to repeat myself because we're seeing it over and over. We're seeing a disconnect between what we're told about history and what we're actually seeing with our eyes. And I feel like the architecture is the gateway to this type of content. If you're new to the old world, I think the World's Fairs are a good place to start. They have gained a lot of attention over the past few years, so there has been, I think, a counter-narrative, an active counter-narrative to attempt to reassert the historical timeline. But I think if you look at all, even slightly deeply into the World's Fairs, you'll find that there's a problem there with the historical narrative. It appears to be that they were using the World's Fairs to reset the minds of the people and showcase a lot of the technologies that were reclaimed from the old world and going to be repurposed. Some were not. Some were going to be repurposed. Some were going to fall into the history books, or even be wiped from the history books. The Sale Hall at Brown University having a pipe organ. Pipe organs being connected with what appear to be healing frequencies in the old world, even to not just healing but prosperity, to having to do with a society that's very in touch with frequency and vibration. It gets into sometimes what we see as the cymatic pattern windows in a lot of these old structures, and the relationship between sound and a healthy society. It's another interesting aspect of the old world. Several high schools here. They built the high schools to look like castles and government buildings. But we'll continue. This is the School of Design, called. And I like to bring you everything I find on location. So we're just rolling through all these structures, these multi-storied brick structures with basement windows and arched windows. And we get to this Statehouse. Again, we mentioned that at the beginning. A bit of an anomaly on the bird's eye depicting the entire structure intact in 1895. And we see here the timeline for the build. That would be 6 years prior to what they're telling us is the completion of this structure. This is a kind of a special state house as well. Another subject that's worth looking into if you're new to this is the state capitol buildings in the United States. The stories around them and just how magnificent some of these things are. And as we get into the interior, you can really get a sense for how old world these really are, and how it's not. This is not built from the hands of our civilization. This is coming from a people that are much more harmonious with their surroundings. And this has a stone dome. This state capital of Rhode Island, and they're saying it's the fourth largest self-supporting marble dome. This dome is made of marble. So right in the class with St. Peter's Basilica, the Taj Mahal, and the Minnesota State Capitol building. So you get two out of the four largest stone domes in the world are state capitol buildings in the United States. That should tell you something. Beautiful state capitol. And again, we get these, what I consider to be forgeries, these old construction photos. I don't put a lot of stock in the old construction photos. Really amazing. Amazing looking structure. The library. Take a look at the ceiling work in the library. Interesting looking construction photo. Colorized, I think. Hard to say how much modification's gone on here. And then very early time period, 1896. So this is directly contradicting what we saw in the beginning there, isn't it? We saw it completed. In the bird's eye view, we saw a completed building in 1896. I thought the implication was that they were just doing the interior for 6 years. But as we can see, we have a disconnect here in the storyline. There are holes in the narrative, folks. Holes in that narrative. And we're poking holes. Or we're highlighting the holes. We're not really poking the holes. We're highlighting the inconsistencies, and we're encouraging people to take a closer look at your history, folks. They've had us so distracted in the modern day. They don't want us looking into the past. They don't want us to care that much about how we got to where we are right now. They really only want us to think about ourselves in the now, and think about what we have and what we need, what they want us to need. This old telephone building. We have a series of theaters. Again, a city of just over 100,000 people, 150,000 maybe, and we have quite a few of these old theaters. The Albee Theater with a magnificent interior. I'll roll through them fairly quickly. And cute-looking Bijou Theater. Keith's Theater. B.F. Keith's Theater. The Lowe's State Theater. Let's see how decorative it is here. And some of the interior of the Lowe's. With the marble columns again, because those were plentiful back then. You can see it's very close to demolition in our modern day. But there's the looking down at the stage of the Lowe's Theater. Truly remarkable. The Majestic Theater. And here you can see the interior was ruthlessly gutted. I like the wording there. That sounds about right. I think there was a concerted effort to conceal the past from us, moving through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right into our modern day, continuous with the anomalous fires and all the rest of it. This is the interior of the Majestic. You have to ask yourself, how many theaters of this magnitude would a city the size of Providence need? We have the Emery's Majestic Theater. Some of the interior. You'd think 2 or 3 would be enough, but it looks like they almost have a dozen here. There was a bunch I missed as well. Of course, there's always quite a few I missed. It's amazing. The deeper you look, the harder you look into a location, the more you find. Alright, moving on to the Turk's Head building. Very interesting looking curved corner on that one. There's the Turk's Head, looking up at the stonework and the ornamentation. A little bit of a closer look at the ornamentation on this sucker. I'm getting close to the end of the file here now, and we're going to zoom in on the Union stations. I say stations because there were 2. This is the newer Union Station with the lower entry. See all the rail lines going down into the underside of the station. And they say that there was an original Union Station, 1847 to 1887, only stood for 40 years. Apparently burned to the ground, or almost, and it was torn down. The funny part of the narrative is they say that it was ready to go. They didn't know what to do with it, and luckily there was a fire, and it gave them an excuse to tear it down. So here's the second one. I don't know if they say they're in the same location or close to, but I suspect we're looking at 2 separate train stations coexisting. I don't think this was built in 1898. I could be wrong. And just trying to connect some dots for you here. Union Station. What do you think about Providence? Do you think we're looking at an old world city, or are you going to tell me that this was founded in 16 blah 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 by the European settlers, and they started construction early, and they started putting these babies up And there really is nothing to question about our historical narrative. What camp are you in? Very interesting as you look into the old world, how much you actually find. And the implication is that there's much more to the story about who we are, what we're capable of. And I think it's a very positive message. We begin to understand that our past, the past that we've been given is a fiction, and there's a truth that needs uncovering. Thanks for joining me.